My father once, unbeknownst to himself, taught me a very important lesson about branding and aesthetics. And it's advice that has shaped every single decision that I have made in my frugal life journey. See, every winter, my dad would buy me a pair of long johns and a pair of boots. If you're not familiar with long johns, they're basically a thermal style underwear that you wear up under your shirts and your pants to keep you warm during the winter months. My dad was what I would consider an old sage in winter wear because he was born and raised on a dairy farm in Kalkaska, Michigan, where the winters could be monstrous at times. So he knew the value of a good pair of long johns and the value of a good pair of boots. And of course, if I had outgrown my winter coat from the previous year, I would also get a new coat. My father always favored this work style boot from Walmart. It was made by a brand named Herman Survivors. And growing up, I could always gauge if my dad was home by two things. Number one was if I heard the sound of his diesel truck pulling into the driveway. But number two, if I had missed the sound of the diesel truck, I would see my dad's old work boots by the door, and that would let me know if he was in or not. As a child, I absolutely adored his boots. And I know as children, we all have these like weird fascinations with things, and my dad's work boots was one of those things. He was a diesel mechanic by trade, and having grown up, as I was saying, on a dairy farm in Kalkaska, Michigan, to a poor family, he valued functionality and practicality above all else. And as a little girl who was a daddy's girl, I admired him so much, and I wanted to be just like my dad. So every winter, we would hop in my dad's diesel pickup truck and we would go to the local Walmart. And we would be in search of those two things: the new pair of thermal underwear and a pair of boots. And I was always so excited when my dad would pick me out a pair of boots that looked like his. And then something interesting and awful actually happened one day. We all have memories from our childhood that kind of scar us, right? Well, this was mine. One of many, but one that I remember nonetheless. So one day when I was about, I want to say I was in the eighth grade, I showed up to school. To set the scene, this was at a time where Timberland brand boots were very popular in my middle school, and everybody who was anybody had a pair of Timberland boots. They were very similar in style to the boots that my father wore, but they were about $200 more expensive. So one day, toward the beginning of winter, I showed up to school wearing my brand new pair of Herman Survivors. And I immediately got made fun of. Like, immediately. I remember a fellow in particular who was in my class was like, "Oh my God, are you wearing Walmart boots?" And began to like laugh raucously with half the class. And for the first time, these boots that I loved became a symbol of shame for me. And I mean, it was a deep seated kind of shame. I no longer even wanted to wear these boots. Unfortunately for me back then, I wanted to fit in, and I was trying to still find myself amid the influence of my peers. I stopped wearing my Herman Survivors. And it didn't matter that they actually kept my feet warm and that they were waterproof. I decided that I would rather tough out the winter in sneakers than to have to deal with that embarrassment. Now, obviously, here I am. I'm 36 years old and I've seen the error of my ways. But what I've also seen is that so many of us fall into this trap, right? We fall into this trap of thinking that we need a certain brand of clothing, we need a certain brand of an item in order for others to see our value. Now that I'm older and wiser, I tend to value things for their functionality, for practical reasons, instead of for aesthetic reasons. I decided a long time ago that there was a certain way that I wanted to live my life. After slaving away and working countless 80-hour work weeks, I decided that I didn't want that anymore. That I valued time with my kids and my loved ones instead of being able to keep up with the Joneses and the newest trends and buy into all of the newest things. And of course, that took some adjustment. It took some sacrifice. It took making a list of my priorities and what I wanted my life to look like, and fearlessly going for that and saying goodbye to everything that was not part of what I wanted my life to be. And so now I tend to buy things for their function, not for aesthetics, not for trends, and definitely not for the brand. Winter just recently hit in Tennessee. Well, it's not officially winter yet, but we've definitely had a bit of a cold sweep come through. Today, the high is 47 and it's 40 degrees right now. And I knew that my usual barefoot shoes was not going to be enough. And suddenly, I found myself in the market for a good pair of boots. Any guesses what I bought? Come on. Come on, give me them guesses. Well, if you guessed Herman Survivors, you just might be right. They are waterproof and they are leather, and they keep my feet exceptionally warm on these chilly winterish days. These boots were my dad's boots of choice. I have owned several pair in my lifetime, each pair usually lasting me 3 to 4 years. And yes, I'm standing here barefoot so I can show you my boots. Listen, for low income people such as myself, buying something for function versus buying something for the brand name can literally mean the difference between the electric bill getting paid or not. It can literally be the difference between family getting fed or not. We have such a ultra consumeristic society, and we tend to value things for their prettiness, for their aesthetic, when we need to get back to the basics and model our lives more like our grandparents did, where form and functionality meant more than anything. I was watching videos the other day about the Great Depression where you might have had two pair of shoes. You had a pair of shoes for Sundays for church, and you had a pair of shoes that you wore during the week. And given the climate crisis, given this environmental frenzy that we're facing, I think it's high time that we get back to something more basic, more practical, and more sustainable. Now, before y'all get started and before y'all come for me, I can already hear a small group of people in the comments saying, well, there's nothing wrong with buying name brand things if you can. You're right. You're absolutely right. There is nothing wrong with buying name brand things if you can. But the reality of the situation here in the US is that something like 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. A lot of us are having a difficult time right now covering things like rent, food, healthcare. The fact of the matter is, a lot of us simply cannot afford the name brand goods that we are charging to our credit cards or foregoing paying an important bill for. We are placing value on the wrong things entirely. It's time to get back to the basics. It's time to stop valuing fashion and aesthetics so much. We shouldn't be so caught up on appearances that we let our choices in our clothing, our homes, our cars bankrupt us. I think it's time that we go back to the basics. Practicality over aesthetics, and making choices where we learn to act our wage. Yes, I said it. Learn to act your wage. I love y'all. My Herman survivors love y'all too. Bye.